and ever-changing views, and computer terminology. Commodore reviews. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to this special episode of Zapped to the Past. This is our Ask the Podcast special. This is the third one we've done where we answer the questions that were put to us by our patrons on our Patreon through our Discord server. So normally we chat about Commodore 64 games, but now we are at the mercy of the questions being asked, and they are varied and odd. So this is a bit of a bonus episode. We said we weren't going to actually release anything until after New Year, but hey ho, here we are.
Surprise!
Surprise! Yeah, you can't keep a good podcast down, and so episode 101 is coming. Not episode 101, the 101, whatever, you know what I mean. Last one was the 100th. So here we are. I hope you're having a good break. We are, hopefully, maybe. I don't know what it'll be like.
Yeah,
Lovely. Hopefully we're going to a good break.
Lovely.
Ainsley Jarvis.
What do you get for Christmas? Gun oil. Good.
Latrine. Yeah.
Lovely.
I blame my shelves. Should we get some questions? Yeah, so
Yes.
let's have a laugh. Let's answer some of these questions, and we'll get on with this. Right, Andy Marsh. His first question is, once again, no, not once again, can you explain why Kit is not a Cylon, please?
So, Kit the car.
Kit the car. I presume because he's a car and he's not in Battlestar Galactica. I mean, it's a simple answer.
You can't cross your streams there. It's two different worlds. I mean, I know he's got the eye of a Cylon because he's got that.
Give them the eye.
the eye of the Cylon.
He's got the eye of the Cylon.
Is that the eye of the tiger?
Is that the first pass of that song? I don't like these lyrics.
I
don't
want
really
there
work
to be
for
a
Rocky.
Cylon version
It's
of
the eye
of the tiger.
of the Cylon.
Just one note.
Balta. So that's why you don't cross the streams. Don't cross the
you can't.
streams.
You can't cross the episodes of TV. You know what they call them, the world streams. You can't do that.
You can't do that. No. Another
Plus, he
question.
doesn't have a Cylon voice. Although, just as an aside, the later Cylons.
Could you imagine if he did?
Well, they do.
Michael,
They do.
What are you doing?
There's the robot Cylons, and then there's they're all robots, but there's the Cylons that have got ice cream heads with lights inside later on in Battlestar Galactica, the original series.
Okay.
And they sort of talk like this by your command. They sort of talk like that. So maybe there's a little bit of that there. But
Maybe there is.
But they're ice cream heads. They've not got the eye. Well, they've got two eyes, but they'll probably have two eyes. I don't know. I'll find a picture of one.
Please do, Betty Lou.
I'm not sure what I'm talking about now.
No, I don't either.
It's all gone mad.
It's getting late.
Oh, God, it's late today.
Another question. Did you ever change the pricing stickers on games to get them for cheaper at the game shop? Be honest.
No, and I'll tell you why I didn't, because they were cheap enough. At the place where you could rent games from in Grimsby, they also sold them, what they called backups.
Yes.
For £2. So you could just go and buy it for £2, whatever game it was.
Yeah.
Which was, when I think about the budget games that they did as well, it seems very mean.
Yeah, I don't. Did they do it for budget ones? I think it's just because they bought
did it for all of them.
Yeah, because they bought one copy, didn't they, and then backed up loads so they could sell multiple copies of the same one.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, they didn't last long after they started doing that.
Yeah, their business model had a key flaw in it.
A legal flaw, some might say.
Yeah, some might say that. Yeah, something tells me that something went wrong.
Yeah, that was our question from Andy Marsh. Buzz it. It said, "Tell me what you think of this song." This was a John Cougar Mellencamp song. Did you listen to this at all? It's Paper in Fire.
I can't honestly remember it. I listened to it a while ago.
I listened to it. It sounds exactly like what you'd expect a John Cougar Mellencamp song to sound like, is my opinion of that. So make of that what you will. David Hearn Writer asks, you two must have played... ice cream heads. You two must have played a few two-player games against each other. Who was the better player at which games? Any memories come to mind?
That's a good question, actually.
The only one I really remember us playing was IK Plus on the Amiga.
Yeah, we played a lot of IK Plus. I was a master at IK Plus.
Was there, I think we played Barbarian a bit as well.
Barbarian, yeah. There's a lot of the two-player fighting games because we did a bit of Way Exploding Fist back in the day.
Not just 2-player, we had 4-player Lotus Esprit Challenge.
4-player Lotus Esprit. I don't remember being very good at that. I'm not generally good at driving games.
It was either me or Lawson that was either the best.
Yeah. You were the better at those. I can't think of any other, because a lot of them we didn't play 2-player. I'm trying to think of mainly probably more Amiga ones, really. I only had one joystick, which meant somebody would have had to bring the joystick around. I did end up with 2, but I don't remember. I'm trying to think of what other 2-player games. There'd be mainly the fighting ones. I can think of Barbarian and the other ones and things like that.
I remember playing a lot of things like Decathlon, Activision Decathlon with Gary. He had terrible waggling technique, which always surprised me.
That surprises me, because I mean that's something he clearly made up for in later life.
Did he? He had really massive arm movement for no reason. It's hard to explain, but he overexerted his arm. I was like, you just got to do it. You move your hand, and he was all like, it's like he was soaring.
maybe he's just watching his dad's technique.
For
joystick waggling, yeah, crazy.
Let's move on quickly. Joshua K asked, "You've both got some good taste in games. Thank you. But I've always wondered if there are any games that were just utter shite, but you were determined to love in spite of yourself. For me, one I loved was Cops and Robbers. Ugh, loved that game. Confess."
Ooh, it's tricky that.
I mean, like I said, I remember playing a lot of Cobra back in the day.
Yeah, I suppose there's your guilty dark secret.
And also that bloody Richard Petty's Talladega for some stupid reason.
I'm trying to think if there was any game that... Yeah, Booty. I got kind of addicted to Booty for a while. That and endlessly loading wizardry in a hope that it would be better.
That sample. I'm going to take that quote. I got addicted to Booty. I'm going to take that out.
Endlessly addicted to Booty. Ah, yeah. So I think Booty. I think a little bit of wizardry, and even remember playing quite a bit of Buck Rogers at one point.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a lot of games then. I had one turbo tape that I'd pretty much all the games on I played for at least 6 months.
That turbo tape that everyone had.
Yeah, the turbo tape. Yeah, I had Buck Rogers on it. Thought Apocalypse was on that, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other one I would say would be, was it Star Trader? The one that was on... I played so much of that. Loads of it. But I know it was rubbish, but I played loads of it.
Yeah. On Arabian Nights, I remember playing that quite a bit.
Yeah, fair enough. It also asks, do you feel bad for pointing out to your listeners that Brian May singing the first verse in Who Wants to Live Forever promptly gets blown out of the water by Freddie Mercury singing the second verse? I love that song and I never noticed it and now I can't unhear it. No, we don't feel bad. We think we're doing a public service.
I was going to say, the more exposure Brian May's voice gets for being the horror that it is, the better. I actually watched that into the entirety of the Guitar Expo with him in it, and up until the point he comes on, it's all good, and then he comes on wailing in that everything I do, and it's like, oh god, that's awful. Somebody screams at the beginning of that in the background. You hear someone go, ah. So
Freddie Mercury.
It will be, yeah, awful
from his grave, probably.
They do a version of "Tie Your Mother Down" in that concert as well, with Brian May singing on that.
No,
not good.
No. So there you go. No, we don't feel bad. Dr. Goggles asks, forgive me if this has been asked before, but what's the first C64 game you remember playing? I think it has. Mine is either Burger Time or Hunchback. It's the two we got with the machine.
Yeah, I think going back, mine would probably be possibly off that turbo tape.
Sorry, not Burger Time, Mr. Wimpy.
Mr. Wimpy. I think mine would be something off that turbo tape. I think one of the early ones off that. Okay. Yeah, something like that.
Okay. David Hearn-Writer asks, what's a book series you got hooked on growing up?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Dragonlance. For me.
Was well into your thingies, weren't you?
Yeah, Dragonlance. I was voraciously just devoured those books when I found them. Just read them in days, all of them, as much as I could get. So yeah, the Dragonlance books were the big ones for me that had a sort of huge impact on what I would like. Probably Lord of the Rings as well, but Dragonlance ones I think were a bit more accessible to my age. By yourself?
It varies a bit. I have and still am an enormous Roald Dahl fan. Mm-hmm. I think I always will be for the whole of my life. So I've read everything he's ever written, everything, including all the weird stuff. It fascinates me, some of the stuff, and I love the stories he writes. So that's a bit of a. But I also quite like So, because I don't know if you could describe that as a series. I also got really heavily into the Ninja Way the Tiger series for a while. So I started reading quite a few of those.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. I'd throw in the fighting fantasy books as well. It's because I just consider them games rather than book series. It's hard to...
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, are they books? Are they games? I don't know. I kind of got into them. And then I got, like you, I sort of flipped between all sorts of different things. I got really into, like you said, Lord of the Rings, but I really enjoyed The Hobbit, and then read The Lord of the Rings, and I enjoyed it slightly less, I think, because it's such a weighty tome. And it felt really overwhelming to try and read that after The Hobbit, because The Hobbit's much easier in.
Yeah, it's a slight
And then
book.
I tried to get into the sort of Shannara books and didn't quite get there with them. I think I just got fed up by that point. So I kind of tuned out the fantasy stuff, and then, I don't know, we're just kind of...
Yeah, the precious elfstones.
Yeah.
It became a thing with us, didn't it? The precious elfstones.
So I kind of just flitted in and out of different books. So the Ninja books kept me for a while, game books, I suppose. And then I'm trying to think if there was a series after that. I never liked the Narnia books or anything like that. We didn't have a Harry Potter back then. I quite like just some Larson books, and I started to get into more, comics and fun and silly things. And I didn't go for really serious reading at that time. I had a series of gold page sort of edged books in a series that my dad had given me, which had Treasure Island and a few others in, and I worked my way through them. I remember I still like Treasure Island to this day. So that sort of stuff. I think that's why I like the Guybrush Threepwood games so much, because of that book.
Yeah, probably.
So,
other fantasy stuff that I got really into as well on the back of Dragonlance was things like the David Eddings, the Belgariad Malorian, Raymond D. Feast's the Magician series, Darkness at Sethanon, Silverthorn, that sort of stuff. Other ones, trying to think of some other stuff, some Ben Bother stuff, some sci-fi stuff. Just some of the big fantasy books from the 80s. Sort of worked my way through most of those.
You went into your horror books, weren't you, for a while? As well?
I was reading a lot of. I read like James Herbert, Sean Hudson, Richard Lehman.
Remember you saying you read a lot
and
of that.
all those kind of things. I just read.
You was a very avid reader, though.
I read a lot of Michael Moorcock stuff, like the Elric things.
Yeah.
They were weird. They were
books piled up that you were reading.
A bit of an eye opener. They were. Well, luckily we had libraries back then. We had local libraries. There was a library literally about 100 yards from my house, the Willows Library, and it was just there, and you could just go, and it had loads. That's where I got all the Elric books from and stuff. Like just around your corners, Michael Moorcock's Elric series. You're like, my God, and things like that. So you just don't get that these days. I mean, everything's on the internet. I get it. So it's just at your fingertips. But there was a thrill of going to the library and getting a book, and then going home and just devouring it. I just loved it. So that was me. Andy, we actually got a load here. Did you ever have a sense that there was shovelware on the C64 back in the 80s? Or when did you begin to become aware that the suits were making decisions to suck your pocket money away?
Oh, that's rapidly becoming more and more obvious that that's the case.
I think that realization has been this podcast. I don't think I was really aware of it back then. Because I think even back then, I think both you and I had a sense of what we liked and what we were going to like. So we generally spent our money and bought the games that we kind of had a sort of inkling, I'm probably going to like this. Barbarian, I'm probably going to like Barbarian. I'm probably going to like Samurai Warrior. These sort of things. So I wasn't blowing my money on crap very infrequently. So I had a good sort of direction of decent stuff. So
yeah, I'd agree with that.
And so I didn't really sort of think, I would read Zap and just read loads of crap reviews and then would never even think of those games again until we'd done this podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's because there wasn't a lot of expendable income in our youth. It's different now, but there wasn't. And it's not that we were, rich, poor or whatever, that's irrelevant. It's just, that's not the way that money was distributed in families. It just wasn't, I didn't get money handed to me except on special occasions, birthdays, Christmases and things like that. So when I was spending that money, when I was buying games, I was very prudent about I made sure I was going to like the game, because it wasn't just about the buying of the game. It was that a trip into town took a bus fare and money and a parent to go with you at that certain age, because I wasn't allowed to go into town on my own until I was, a bit older. So it needed, and I, or my brothers, not so much my brother actually would have been in the Navy, but my sisters would go, and it just was it was an event to go and do that, and it happened at certain times of the year. It didn't happen all the time. And so not only were you limited by the games that were out and on the shelves at the time, but also limited by what you felt would appeal to you. So it was actually quite a you were very selective because you were spending. It felt like a lot of money was coming out of your hand if you bought a game for £10. And then at a certain stage, I stopped buying games completely because I didn't need to.
Because we were just getting them on disc and copied.
I was just getting copies all the time, so I didn't need to buy them anymore. But we also had, uniquely, I think, in some ways, J&M Software in Grimsby, who rented games for £1.
Yeah.
So you could go and literally try them and then buy it for £2 off one of their backups. Or you could, I tended not to buy many of their backups because I quite liked having the original boxes. I guess that's why collectors have them to this day. But it was amazing to have a thing like that as much as it was a crazy business that was doomed. It was an interesting thing to have for a while.
Yeah.
But you were prudent shoppers back then.
And then, and then by the time we got access to everything through disc copies being sent to you and Gary, we just didn't care at that point.
Yeah, which is just. Yeah. And when looking back with the shovelware thing, I think I wasn't aware that it was that, but at the same time, it's obvious that when you've got lots of prudent shoppers out there spending money carefully with review magazines, the easiest thing to do is just push out loads of crap because something will stick potentially.
Yeah.
No, so that was so I think that's how it ended up that way. And of course, now as we've done this podcast, it's become more and more obvious that is exactly how the industry was working, as an industry would. It manufactures things en masse. So that was the industry.
Absolutely. Next one, he said, what was the first game that you played where you became aware that there were ethical issues involved? You guys mentioned Frank Bruno, but was that the first time you started to sense the questionable ethics, or was that in retrospect? Definitely in retrospect. I don't. At the time, in the mid, we're growing up in with 1985, 1988 is what we're covered so far. Yeah, we're growing up in Grimsby, which was, and is what it is. It's a coastal. It was a white coastal town. It's what it was, and there was no question of ethics. It just didn't even enter our minds because we just were never confronted with it.
No.
So we just lived our lives. We didn't really care. And I know it's, you can look back on it now and go, okay, well, that's fair. But we were just, I was from a council estate. We didn't have much money, blah, blah, blah. But you just didn't think about those things. You just went to school and you just were just whatever you were. It didn't really matter.
It never even occurred to me. And only when you are an adult, actually, and you're a bit more enlightened, and perhaps even when you've got children of your own as well. Not saying that's the only rationale for that, but when we've looked back, you realise how questionable these things are. Frank Bruno was the tip of that spear in some respects, but it actually started, I think, in the advertising. Some of the game adverts that we'd looked at. We mentioned the ones that are fun for the crapverts, but there's a lot of game adverts that we've looked at from back then. We were like, we can't. There's nothing really valuable to dive into in terms of its crapness. They're just offensive, and they just rely on offensive stereotypes. Even the later adverts that we've seen, like even to some extent the Barbarian one and Vixen that comes later, where you've just got a scantily clad model for no reason whatsoever and stuff like that. No, it starts to feel distasteful.
Yeah, UXB, exploded bomb with the picture of it's just not great. But no. So it's definitely a retrospect thing when you grow older and times change and we change and just and everything changed around it. So you look back and you go,
absolutely.
Did you take part in the 8-bit wars arguments in the playground? Were you super loyal to any computer systems? Yeah, C64.
Yeah, absolutely.
Damn right.
C64 all the damn way.
I would tell those Specky's owners that they were fools and they didn't have a decent sound chip. And that was that.
Yeah. Yes, I used to record audio tapes for the Spectrum owners, and they used to do the same for me, and it was always a one-sided fight.
Absolutely.
They'd sit there with the rubber keys trying to program things in BASIC, and I would hit my button on my action replay and show them the latest demo I'd just coded, and how are you doing that? It's like, because that's the kind of machine I've got here. You can do that with it. Can you do that on yours? No, you can't, can you? You probably could if they'd sat down and plugged in the Kempston, Christ knows what, to make it do whatever it did.
Yeah, exactly.
I never liked Spectrums because they had so many bolt-on bits sticking out the back,
Bolt-on?
Weird.
Bolt-on?
Bolt-on. Possibly a Spectrum welcoming committee.
Shoot it out of the sky, now.
But they just did. I remember going around to my mate's house who had one, and thinking, because in the Commodore, you just plugged the joystick in. Not so much on a Spectrum, was it? It had this big interface thing sticking out the back, and you had to plug your thing into that, and it all looked a bit fraught and a bit wibbly wobbly, and a bit, if you touched it, it would bend, and you're like, oh, I don't, looks a bit flimsy, that, but it is what it is. But and C64 all the damn way.
And I had one other friend with an Amstrad. Poor guy.
You had one friend with an Amstrad. I knew someone who had an Oric Atmos. God help us.
God help us.
And then, of course, at the school, we were all, for a while, it was all BBC Micros. We had PET computers, actually, Commodore PETs originally, which is amazing when I think about
PETs,
it. Yeah, and then they got changed to BBC Model Bs en masse. And I remember having a massive stand-up argument with the computer teacher about why they were so crap. I mean, they're not crap computers, but they were compared to what I was doing on the C64 at the time.
So you didn't just have arguments in the playground; you had arguments in the classroom.
Well, I foolishly asked the teacher at one point for some advice about raster interrupts and non-maskable interrupts, and he didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And I remember him just standing there going, imagine if someone's waving a flag. I'm like, you're an idiot. You're not helping me with this problem I've got with raster time and the clock cycles on this demo at all.
What do you know? I just want to teach you about barcodes.
Do these opcodes, is it 2 cycles or 3 cycles? I remember just looking at it with this blank expression like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'll just do this database. All right.
Yeah, exactly. This is an odd one. When was the first time you took a screwdriver to your computer system to fix it? And did it end well? I don't think I ever did. I
did.
For what?
I changed the LED light on my Commodore 64 to a green LED light.
Oh, did it end well?
From the red one. It worked. I mean, it was not particularly, that's a mod really, more than a fix. The only fix I had to apply was when I had to smack my power pack with a broom handle for reasons unknown, because it would periodically just switch itself off, which was fucking annoying.
Yeah, I had the brown one with the fuse at the back, and sometimes you had to take it out and put it back in to get it working again. Because there was you could touch a couple of connections at the back, couldn't you, to reset it?
Yeah. You could if you were daring, yeah.
If you touched the wrong one, it'd just blow it up, wouldn't it?
If you touched the wrong things, you could blow a fuse, I think, inside the machine. Yeah.
Anyway, no, I never did that. Did you guys ever try the paperclip reset back on the Hack on Your C64? How did that go? No, I never did.
No, I never did, because I had an action replay, and I actually had an expert cartridge first, and then I got an action replay cartridge. So these things were never an issue for me to do that.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't really interested, so no, didn't really do that.
Just as an aside, did you have a tape copy system thing for the Commodore 64?
Backup board.
Was it you? Yeah, was it you that had one of them?
I had a backup board. Yeah. 2 weeks paper money, that was.
Yeah, they were brilliant little devices. You plugged 2 data sets into them, didn't you? I seem to recall.
Yeah. Basically, we plugged that into the C64 and it had two connections. You plug one and two. You press play on one and play and record on the other.
Yeah, brilliant little device. What a cool device that is, yeah.
It was, yeah. David Headwright asks, you've covered some examples where Zapp's rating was too high or too low. What's the worst example you've seen thus far?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh, it is.
Depends what you mean by too low. If it's a high game that should have got higher, there's been a few of those. Games that got 80s when it should have been 90s. But,
well, I would argue that, what was the one we said? Oh, the train.
Yeah, the train should have been a gold medal.
Should have been, definitely, all day long.
Hands down, I think, gold medal.
Pirates maybe as well, because I don't think they knew what they had.
60 odd percent.
60 odd percent, yeah. But the train definitely too high, and I know you're not going to like this, but you can probably see this coming. It's Mercenary.
Yeah.
98%.
98% now. Too high, that.
Way too high. I get it, but it's boring.
Yeah. What did Elite get? Did they do ratings then?
Yeah. It was 90. It was a gold medal, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Elite as well.
Again, another one.
Other games.
Actually, any of those flight simulators, I think they've all got a little bit too high in my book,
Project Stealth. You were asking earlier on tonight when we were recording, what was the last gold medal before this one? It's Project Stealth Fighter.
Yeah,
that should have been a gold medal.
But that was 96%, wasn't it? Mysteriously.
Bunship, nope.
They're just not my cup of tea, then maybe.
But too low. Train, Pirates, probably that should be up higher.
Exploding Fish should have got a gold medal.
Way the Exploding Fish should have been a gold medal. Revolutionary.
IK Plus should have got a higher grade than it did. It got 80-something percent.
Did it? I thought it got a Sizzler.
No, it was upper 80s, wasn't it? But it should have been in the 90s.
Yeah, easy. Maybe, yeah. Mark Fletcher asks, are any of you still waiting for Football Manager to load?
I never started to load it in the first place because it was never my cup of tea. I tell you.
I am. I've got two Commodores on the go. One I'm waiting for Football Manager to load. The other is Three Stooges.
Still bloody loading that.
Still loading. Dennis B asks, I'm certain this has been asked before, and I think I heard Ultimate 1541 mentioned at a point, but anyway, how do you guys play C64 games these days? Real hardware, FPGA, mix, or software emulation? Vice. I just use Vice.
I did have a real 64 and it didn't live very long, which apparently is a common curse with them. I got one off eBay and it switched on a couple of times and then it just stopped. I think just these chipsets on them are just, and they've been around in someone's loft for however long. They just don't last very long. They need to be reseated and all sorts of stuff. And I just didn't have the money all the time to do that. I got one of those C64 Maxes which I use now and again. But it's no different really to plugging in a Vice emulator, really, is it? And that gives me actually more freedom to put it on whichever screen I want.
Yeah.
I can plug the joystick in. The joystick from it has actually been the thing that's been the most useful. The USB Competition Pro that comes with that.
Yeah,
because I can just plug that directly into my system. I use Mac for everything, so I don't have because Vice is really engineered for PC users. I think
it is. Yeah,
truthful.
Yeah, I just use Vice and small sort of 8-bit dough. And you can see that NES pad.
Yeah, little NES pad. Why don't you use your little joystick? Why is that?
It's at work. I don't know. I use that little thing at work. I just have this hooked up to my PC, and it's Bluetooth. I don't have any USB ports free.
Fair enough.
So that's Bluetooth.
That's what I use anyway, and that offers me the greatest flexibility I've found with all of the different versions of Vice and everything else. I do
hook it up if I'm noticing like some lag, or if I sometimes say, is this laggy? And when we're saying about I'm trying to press fire, it's not happening, I will shove something in USB and hook it up wired just to check it.
Yeah.
Usually it doesn't make any difference. It's usually bad programming.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. David Hearnwright asks, who would win in a clash between a Cylon and a Cyberman?
Cylon.
A Cylon, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Cylon are way better. Way better.
Yeah, especially the more
they're made
modern
of metal.
ones.
They just don't wear sort of, pleather suits that are just spray painted grey with fairy liquid bottles on their heads.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't doubt me, go back. If you go, just roll the time clock back.
Not the thingy on Raid or whatever it is. You're gonna.
Just go back in early Cyberman versus early Cylon. Early Cylons look like Cylons in Battlestar Galactica. Early Cybermen look like guys with snuds on, wearing a spray painted fairy liquid bottle on their head with a black ring for a mouth.
And they're also stupid when they're faced with someone that will just kill them, like that. Is it the Rascal on Raid?
Oh no, these ones predate that. They've got mining lamps on their heads.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They just go, yes, this is the doctor. Yes, like that. Speak like that. It's really funny.
Oh no. Dennis B asks, anyone have any idea why, when the default of Joyport changed from port 1, mostly older games, to port 2?
Yeah, we looked into it, didn't we? And it was to do with the keyboard. It's to do with the way the Commodore detects the keyboard in port 1.
Yeah.
You need to switch that off. And so at least port 2 is better because constantly checking for keys and having your game optimized is not a good thing.
Yeah, and port 1 would thingy over to Control 2, 1 and whatever's in the top left corner, break or whatever it was. I can't remember what's in the top left corner.
It's essentially it operates through the keyboard. So you're constantly checking for a keyboard input all the time. Well, you don't need to do that on port 2. So why would you use it?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
hassle.
There you go.
Would you go back in time for a donut, Edie?
Of course I would. Then I could stop that bloody Brian Bloodaxe from... Hang on. Did you say a donut?
Yep, because that's what Tara does in our sponsor's book, Back in Time for a Donut, set in the land down under.
She goes back in time with everything she could do just for a donut.
Well, that and to stop her sister, the Prime Minister, from destroying Australia's democracy.
Oh, wow. Well, fair enough then. But there's no mention of going back in time, like to stop giant pigeons from coming about or anything like that?
No, but she does want to put things right, fix the past to fix the future and all that.
So that's Back in Time for a Donut by David Hearn. Available at Amazon or Book Depository. Also available everywhere as an audio book. Good Lord.
At least she's not going back in time to make us play Elite again.
No Dizzo, no Lave. No Dizzo, no Lave.
You said Lizzo.
Lizzo to Dave. It could be Lizzo to Dave. Anyway, by David Hearn's book. It's very good.
Yes, I agree with that.
David Hearnwright asks, do you think you'll ever do a Zap Back special reviewing the games you haven't covered? Not just the dog eggs, but classics like Jack Attack, Jupiter Lander, Radar Rat Race, and Mercenary the Second City. Surely the Mayor of Targ will get a free trip and Chippy Tea on arrival. Don't think we're ever going to look at Mercenary the Second City, are we?
No, I didn't like the first one.
No,
really.
We're not going to do that. Oh. We have got plans. There are some...
It's about 30 games, isn't there?
There's about 30. Yeah, it's about 30 games I think we didn't look at for about the first 4 issues of Zap, where we were just picking and choosing some before we hit everything. So we are going to hit them, and we are going to look at them at some point, probably in a sort of rapid fire way as we used to do them back then, rather than the sort of in-depth one we do them now. So it'll just be a case of looking at them, having a quick thing.
A bit like we did the C16 special that way.
Yeah, so it'll be a quick fire one. As for some earlier stuff, we may do. I mean, we obviously did our episode zeros where we looked at some of the classics, but there's a couple that we
could do an episode -1.
We could do, yeah. There's a couple. I mean, we never looked at Paul Wokes' Encounter. That's one I would like to go and have a look at.
We should go and have a look at that.
But I think that's coming up on a budget re-release. So I think a lot of these classics, like Bruce Lee, is coming up on a budget re-release. Yeah. So I think a lot of these early ones will probably hit somewhere on a budget re-release, perhaps. So we'll wait and see. But if there's anything you do want us to desperately look at, obviously, we can probably fit them in somewhere. David Hearn again asks, what modern thing, anything, example, music, a game, NFTs, Insta influences, hug therapists, don't you get and don't want to get? NFTs, Insta influences, and hug therapists. There's your answer. What are they? I know what NFTs are. Insta influences, obviously I know what they are, but I don't get it. I do, but I don't.
Don't want to get it. I don't like the idea of cryptocurrency at all. I don't like all the weird derivative, acronymic, crazy things that come off it, like NFTs, and I don't get it. I don't know. There's something, if someone puts a pound coin in my hand, its origins don't necessarily bother me that much. I don't really question its legitimacy. I've got a pound in my hand. I don't know about this Bitcoin stuff. I don't dig it. People have been trying to hard sell me that kind of crap for ages, and someone was trying to tell me the benefits of having a Revolut. I don't know what that is, and I don't want to know.
No, I don't.
No.
I also don't get and don't like. We get a lot of these emails. SEO optimization.
Oh, bloody search engine optimization. Yeah, we can optimize you.
We like you look at your website, but you're not really rated on Google. I mean, it's like we don't care.
Yeah, let's just expel the myth. There's no magic to it, folks. Just make your website about the thing you're talking about and use those words. There you go. I've let you in on the secret. It's like that bloody stupid book, The Secret. I've just told you the secret. It's been told between Egyptians and Mayans for years. I tell you what, just on influencers, no, I don't get them. I was on holiday recently and I was in a place that was surrounded. There was so many influencers everywhere. All they seem to be doing is perpetually taking photographs and images and videos of each other, doing really weird things. There was two women in this particular, I was in like a spa type thing, for an easier description. There was just two women. One was half getting out the pool and the other one was videoing her doing it. And they were doing this for hours. And then taking pictures of each other just walking around. And that was it. And then, they weren't alone. There was a whole bunch of them in this particular place. It was kind of a new place that had recently opened. So I guess that's why they were all there. Just weird that I just couldn't get my head around it. So I just photobombed them. So somewhere around the world on loads and loads of influencers' backgrounds, there's me going, hello. I got about 40. I was playing a game with my wife who was there at the time. She was hiding in the shadows because she didn't like that kind of thing. She's like, oh, don't get involved. I'm like, no, I'm just going to be in the background just doing my thing. So that, there is a very, irate, bald-looking northerner in about 40 top influencers' background images from some fancy pants spa that they were all teeming around like wasps. Yeah. So, I mean, look out for me.
It is. It would be quite easy to answer this question and just get into sort of old man shouts at cloud. To think. I agree. But one thing I would argue is, and I just don't get it, is I don't understand a lot of YouTube. I don't understand the notion of the YouTube thumbnails where it's just some guy looking shocked at something or whatever. They just
is that what they call those?
I don't understand it. I don't get them. But what I don't understand is this notion, and it bugs me that game. And I get it because obviously the expensive games are expensive these days. But it's this notion that you've experienced a game rather than played it, and it's just the same. No, you haven't. You haven't played it. You've watched someone play it. It's not the same.
I don't get it. But I was reading a really interesting article about that. And it's not an old man shouting at clouds article. It was basically saying that the whole notion of curating your own content is now more important, no matter what that content is. And some of those people who do those reaction videos, such as they are like bookmarks for content. That's all they really are. Is they're just ways of organizing the content into things you need to react to. But I don't know. It was a psychological piece. I think it was in one of the psychology magazines that I periodically seem to find downstairs.
I mean, there are reaction to reaction videos.
Yeah, I do some of them all the time, and I don't really.
so it's I wouldn't know what I was reacting to. Reaction to so and so's reaction to the new trailer of Indiana Jones. Like
I saw a guy reacting on a video. It was on a YouTube short. It was a guy reacting to somebody drawing like an image. He was like drawing a picture of a pencil. And he was going, "Oh my God, he's drawn a line. It's a line. Oh, it's a pencil." I'm like, "Who watches this?" And then I thought, I just did. God help me.
You did, absolutely.
Yeah, so I then bleached my eyes.
And we all know that the best reaction video on YouTube is the 4-second video of the dog reacting to the fart.
Yes, we'll post that video. Do you know, I've seen that video grow so much. I remember when it had like 20 views. Now it's got over 1 million.
Yeah, and fair play. It's just 4 seconds of your life that you'll want to watch over and over again.
You could YouTube it. My dog's reaction to fart. You can't. It's just 4 seconds long.
It's the fact that the dog's looking one way and then suddenly it's looking another, and there's no in between frames.
I know, it's really weird. It looks really disgruntled. Like
the dog's head moves just like faster than you can possibly do anything.
One of the greatest YouTube videos of all time.
Absolutely, that and the hand thing.
Yeah, doing the hand thing. Yeah, that's a very weird one.
But that's weird. But it's creative. I don't mind creative, weird stuff. But it's just a nod.
Yeah, that one.
It's just a nod.
Very strange. Very strange.
AL82 Retro asks, how long does it take you, Zusha, to concoct the lead-in sections describing the content of the episode, and are they always done in a single take?
And short answer, it doesn't take me very long, and they're always done in a single take.
There you go. He also asked, looking back, was there another computer or console that you wish you owned, perhaps in preference to the C64?
No, not in preference.
At that time. No, there was nothing I envied at all.
I considered it was the best home computer in the world. I felt like I had the best thing.
Yeah, I did as well. I think looking back now, probably maybe the Atari 800 XL was probably a better computer out at the time, a bit faster and did some stuff, a little bit better. I think some of the games I liked, but back in that, they just weren't a thing in the UK really. No, so we weren't aware of it. Yeah, it just wasn't something we were aware of. So there was nothing I looked at and went, why would I looked at like rubber key nightmare that was the Spectrum?
I never even got into consoles for ages, for years. I mean, really up to Xbox 360 was where I started to buy games for them. I didn't have them. I had friends that had them, rented sometimes, but I never looked back at the C64 era with anything other than C64 eyes, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no. Dr. Goggles asks, something that's been bugging me for a while, what game is the little snippet of outro music from that you use after the last game is reviewed? I feel like I know it, but can't pinpoint it. I'll probably kick myself when I find out.
That's from, it's the Monty on the Run. It's from Monty on the Run.
Yeah. It's that. It's the death. It's the end of the game. It's game over music, isn't it?
Yeah, it's game over music from Monty on the Run.
Yeah. AL82, Retro asks, having listened to the podcast for a while, I gather myself, Zapped to the Past, and Zusha, Graham, have taught game design. Ever thought about doing an episode about that in more detail? I'd be really interested to learn more exactly about how you structure the courses, what you teach, and whether you include the history of old machines like the C64 and Amiga in the course material. It's not something I've ever thought of doing a podcast or doing an episode on. I don't know what we'd actually do. I think...
to me, it's more of a thing to talk about, really. I mean, I did teach. I don't anymore. You do teach, I suppose.
I still do. So. What do we do? How do you structure courses? I mean, obviously today it's all... I mean, game design is what I teach, so it's built around learning engines, so Unreal and Unity and things like that. Do I sneak in stuff? Of course I do. It usually gets blank-eyed, glassy stares from the students when I mention sort of old games, but they're just like, what's that? Don't understand that. Don't get it. It's like games didn't start 10 years ago, or whatever. But so you have to sort of, you got to play to your audience a bit. These are 18 to 21-year-olds, so they teach at degree level, and you can't be talking about whiz-ball because they just don't get it. They just do not understand. Just doesn't compute. And they just have no use for understanding the history of old machines. So there's a bit of history, sort of this is where we got from where to A to B, but they're not bothered, a lot of them. So it's what it is. As for thinking, I think doing an episode in more detail, I'd like to think that I think it comes across in some of our sort of reviews and observations and analysis of games about how the design is good or bad or could have been better. So I think there's elements of that creep in, and I think hopefully it shows that we understand that, and I mean that's where it comes in.
Back many moons ago when I was teaching some of this, I did introduce. We had a module called the history of games, the games industry, or the history of games, and
you did.
Some of that we did cover with. It's the trouble is contextually impossible for like you say, for students to understand what you're going on about, really. So you actually spend half the time trying to explain what you're talking about before you even get to the point where you're talking about games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's more of a launch point for ideas, I tended to think. And my main mission when teaching those things was to get the students out of the mindset that the games industry began and ended in America with certain consoles and with, the Nintendos and with the Segas and with the later, Microsofts and Sonys, and that there was an entire wing of the games industry that wasn't reliant on, lots of those sort of things. But in actuality, it's a bit of a folly exercise because they're almost paying you lip service. They're not really interested in it. They're certainly not going to do anything reading on it, and they don't get what you're talking about. Even when you show them, and we used to encourage them to do retro remakes at one point, and sometimes they got it. More often than not, you just ended up with a bit of a shell of a game. It's not you. At a certain point, you realise you're not being fair to them because it's just not their era. It's not their era at all. It has no bearing on them. They don't understand what you're talking about. Yes, coding for those early C64 and stuff in those games is an impressive thing to understand machine code. But it absolutely, like everything, it's evolved so much now. It's irrelevant. It's pointing out the nuances of machine code assembler to someone that can code in really well in Unity is like they're in a different world. You're different planetary universes, and it's a nice thing to have as a knowledge. But it has no purpose in there other than retro reverie to look back and go, wow, some of those games are really cool, in that retro kind of way. And you're like, well, remember, for some of us, it wasn't retro because we were there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. David Herdwright asks, what's the most memorable concert you've been to, and why was it so?
It's an interesting question, actually. Adamant was interesting when I went to see Adamant. I saw Adamant at Birmingham a few years ago now with my wife. That was quite interesting. But about 2017, we went there, I think. 2 hours. He was really good, actually. Really good. Historically, Ministry was good. Frontline Assembly were amazing when I saw them. That was because I really wanted to see them, and that was
I won't be
really good. You did, yeah, because we saw Cubinate, Sheep on Drugs.
Yes,
and Frontline Assembly at the same gig, which was really good. I went to see Diantved. It wasn't, and that was probably one of the most memorable for the wrong reasons because it was so disappointing. I really wanted that to be good, but it wasn't.
I mean, my first one was good. It was Alice Cooper, big stage show.
Yeah,
that was quite a good one.
That'd be quite good.
The Rush gigs that I've been to, they were good.
Yeah. You see Satriani, didn't you? But that was good.
I did see Satriani. Yes, it was okay. It was on the Extremist tour. It was just a lot of noodling.
Yeah,
there's a lot of noodling. Mega City 4. I went to see them a couple of times. The first time I saw them was really, really good. I think it was at Derby Uni, actually. They were really, really good. That was really good. The Mission, I've seen them a couple of times. What about Eve? Saw a few bands, but yeah, probably the Rush ones, I guess.
You saw a thingy, didn't you? Really early on in their careers.
Oh, Green Day.
Dookie.
Actually, I suppose if it's the weirdest ones I've seen, then it probably Green Day. I saw them in a pub in Wigan. It was they'd had Kaplunka 39 Smooth out, which was I think the first EP and the first album, and they were they were doing some dates, and we went there and saw them, and they had Dookie coming out soonish, so they played Basket Case, Longview. It was like the first time they were playing them over in the UK.
Yeah,
the album that broke them, basically, made them massive. So yeah, that was interesting. I suppose that would be it, really. Yeah,
I've seen Rush a couple of times with you, which was really good. I think the second time more memorable because I think it was like an epic, wasn't it? The second time. I mean, the first time was amazing. That was the first time I'd ever seen them do a proper medley Rush when they do that sort of encore medley, which was mind-blowingly good.
Yeah,
and then the second time was really good. I remember seeing Nights of Ebb, believe it or not, in a tiny nightclub in Derby, which was called The Warehouse. And there was only about 90 people in the whole place, and they literally blew the speakers to pieces during that gig. It was quite spectacular. And then afterwards, they did a night there called Vogue Minogue, which was like there was 2 floors to the warehouse. There was obviously the warehouse part, and there was an upstairs bit, and that was the upstairs bit. I remember dancing on the dance floor with the guys from Nights of Ebb to Kylie Minogue because they destroyed the speaker, so the gig had to stop. So they were like, right, we're going upstairs. Anyone want a beer? So we did.
I'd also just want to throw in as well the 8-Bit Symphony.
Yeah, that was something memorable.
Pretty impressive, I have to say.
That really was something memorable.
Yeah, that was good. Dr. Goggles asks, what happened to Flaky Bits 1.0? It was Graham's bedroom. He moved out.
It was my bedroom. I don't live there anymore, yeah. Flaky Bits Studio is a joke because everything that we produced at a certain point, whether it was music, whether it was video, whatever it was produced, and we did a magazine as well, was produced in my bedroom at a certain point. And so when we put credits on these things, we just credited to Flaky Bits Studio. And then obviously when I've moved house, obviously a few times since then and grown up, as it were, when we decided to redo this as a joke with Adrian, that's why I put Flicky Bits 2.0 Studio on, just so it's a bit of an in-joke. Well, it's an in-joke, but it was just a joke that I knew would make Adrian laugh when he heard it.
It did, yeah. Flicky Bits 2.0. But yeah, Flicky Bits 1.0 was just your bedroom.
It was, yeah. And Flaky Bits is what it was full of, let me tell you. It was just dirty, grufty stinkhole. So.
Especially after I've been in there. Etienne asks, are you aware that when converted to euros, your patrons pay 666? Coincident, a joke, or are you part of a satanic cult? All three.
Yeah, a little bit of column A.
Yeah, why can't it be all three? It is coincidence. It's fluctuating currency scales.
Yep.
Could be anything. David Henrighter asks, Lave or Dizzo? Neither.
That's a good question. Neither.
I'd rather
if
be
I could avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tag, surely.
So just because that trade route is boring.
It's really
you don't take
boring.
anything exciting on that trade route ever. No, even if you pick up slaves, you're not going to have them for long because the police just get you immediately. So
yeah,
stupid.
Yeah. Andy Marsh asks, now that you have played more games on the C64 than any mere mortal being on Earth, what percentage of games are crap? And more importantly, can you give a top 5 reasons for why they are crap? No playtesting, experienced coders, etc. I would say about 90%.
I would be higher. I would say probably 95%.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe 90. Maybe 90.
Maybe we must be approaching 1,000. We're getting towards 1,000 games now. Probably 900 we've played.
Yeah.
So if you think about 90%, that would be around about 800 games would be rubbish or crap.
That's probably about right.
It's not far off that, is it?
Yeah, it's not.
Top 5 reasons. No playtesting, experienced coders. Just shovelware, just shit shoved out.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put inexperienced coders in there because
I think it's
at some point everyone's inexperienced.
I think
exploited inexperienced coders. I think
would be the word.
No playtesting and sometimes no game design is a problem. But more of the reasons why they're crap is actually down to the publishers because they have no quality control whatsoever. They are out to rinse people's money. Yeah, and that's being proven more and more and more as we've gone into it.
And there's some games, there is not. There's no way in hell that anybody could have ever looked at that and gone, yeah, that's passable. Put it on slap it on a disc, put it out. There's a couple we played, tonight. Well, not tonight, for tonight's podcast we just did. And it's just no. Lee Enfield. There's just no way in hell. I can't even understand the thought process where someone looked at that and went, that's good enough to press on a disc or whatever and put on a tape and try and sell. It's just not. So I don't know. It's just greedy publishers mostly.
Yeah, there's a little bit of all sorts. There's if I was to think of a common rationale, I think probably they didn't have playtesters really. It wasn't a thing. So there's a little bit of that, but it's the QA control in publishing and publishers wanting to make money. That's where I put in the most blame because in some instances, things like Outrun, you've got massively exploited people. They're just taking people to one side and flashing money at them and really, knowing that the games they're putting out aren't really that good, and just taking the money off them, and it's not nice to see that. And you hear later about their shoddy experience. I mean, even recently with the experience the guy had with Pac-Land and the description of the guy that developed that, and you realise how traumatic some of their experiences are, and how much on goodwill these things existed, and the guy didn't get paid for 2 months, for goodness sake. And honestly,
well, you think about Ocean and Whizball and Sensible Software and how much they got
making
ripped
any
off
money from that. Yeah, absolutely.
Just dreadful. So the blame lies basically in the greedy middlemen by the looks of it. That's what it seems to be mainly turning out to be. And so all these sort of there's an part of me that reads these books on certain software houses, and then we play the games that these certain software houses put out, and the two just don't line up.
No.
And I think that's, you're painting yourself into a certain way to be a certain thing in a certain book, and it's like, oh, okay. And then you play the games, you go, hang on a minute. No.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that has surprised me massively is that I some of the companies, I won't name them, but some of the companies that I held in very high regard have proven themselves to be a lot worse than I ever thought they could possibly be. And some of the companies that have produced seem to be a lot more prudent about things. Case in point, Thalamus. As much as there's all sorts of controversy about who owned what and who did what, their output is consistently quite good, if not very good.
Yeah.
So whereas you look at some of the other companies and it's gone from being reasonably okay to more often than not, it's more miss than hit. And I think that's a problem. Lots of overuse of the same engines as well. And I don't know, there's all sorts of issues there, isn't there? But some of these companies need a good hard look at themselves, or needed a good long hard look at themselves.
They did, yeah, 30, 40 years ago, yeah. Andy Marsh asks, is Martipello a Nectron? Yes. He's a knee neck. He's a knee Nectron.
Yes, he is. And don't mess with him because he can crush your windpipe with his knee neck.
Absolutely. He's a wide what's it swallower. That's what he is.
He is. That sounds like that little moment in that Brass Eye episode. He's a bunty man. He's a chimney bottler.
He is. He's actually, he's Diana from V when she swallows that.
Oh, that moment when she swallows that
hamster or whatever.
Hamster, rat, whatever it is. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Mac Fletcher says, favourite Zap cover, go.
I have a choice between two spring to mind. I really like the one for the sort of nuclear blast with the melting soldier really early
issue
on that
2,
one.
Theatre Europe.
Which is an amazingly gruesome cover. It's delightful and it's gruesome. And I also really like the one with the woman on the front for Leaderboard, where it's got the reflection of the golfer in her glasses, but she's licking a massive lollipop and it's really overly suggestive.
Yeah,
just
true.
for the pure cheekiness of it. They're the ones that spring to mind straight off the bat without looking at them all. Those are the ones that just immediately shot in my mind.
Yeah. I like the Green Beret one.
Yeah, with the angry teeth guy.
Yeah, that's good. The Paradroid and the Eidolon, probably the other couple I really like.
The image out of all of those that sticks in my mind for merely making me laugh out loud, and even did when I really looked at it, was that Darth Vader with his triangle upside down. Still makes me laugh to this day.
Yeah. Happy
Looks
Vader.
really happy Vader, yeah.
Happy Vader. But I'll tell you what it isn't, and that's the Packland one.
No, it's possibly the least favourite.
Yeah. Andy Marsh asks, was the extended beep from Fairground Attractions perfect, the vocal catalyst that eventually evolved Flavor Flav into Tweaky, Dr. Theopolis, his robot, as we talked about earlier on tonight's episode? Yes, probably. Why not?
It's exactly how it happened.
That's exactly. The clock became sentient, and he slowly turned into a silver robot.
Exactly.
The evolution of Flavor Flav is, takes long. And then Buck turns up. David Henrighter says, what is your favourite Halloween game and why is it Friday the 13th?
It isn't.
It's not. Are we talking like C64? Because if it's C64, if I had to pick one horror game, it'd probably be Forbidden Forest.
My favourite horror game?
But if it's horror game in general?
Yeah. Don't know. C64 game, probably Cauldron 2. I like the thematic of that, even though it's rock hard.
Yeah.
It feels kind of Halloween-y.
I think
and things, I guess.
If I was going to pick two, there would be Silent Hill 2. If we're going away from the C64.
Oh, yeah.
Silent Hill 2 and Condemned.
Yeah, I'd go for Condemned. I think that's one of the creepiest games. That, and I think Zombie U has a creepiness.
Yeah, Zombie U is pretty good as well. Yeah.
Because that's just the way that guy's talking to you over the headset thing. It's quite bleak, that game, but definitely Condemned. Game's terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Not many games are like that either. It really does stick out. That it's a Sega game, isn't it? It's a genuinely creepy game. That is.
Yeah, well, it's Monolith. Monolith developed it. So Monolith who did Fear and No One Lives Forever. And
Fear was good. The first Fear game was pretty good as well.
Fear 2's good as well. Fear 3 not so much.
No, not as much.
But yeah, so if it's C64, I mean, the C64 struggles to do horror. I mean, because it's 8-bit atmosphere, it's where horror lies.
Yeah.
So, but I think Forbidden Forest would be.
It's creepy-ish, I suppose.
And that's probably one of the few. But apart from that, Silent Hill 2, because I think Silent Hill 2 is a masterpiece. And then Condemned. Resident Evil games I love, but I don't find them particularly scary. 7's quite scary, actually, but because again, it's.
Do you ever play that weird demo thing that was on the
PT?
Yeah,
I've still got it. My PS4, my PS4 still has that on it.
Yeah, mine still got it on it.
That
was pretty creepy.
they sell for quite a lot with those on it.
Really?
Yeah, because you can't get it anymore.
Wow, I've still got it on mine.
Yeah, I've still got it on mine. Never delete it. It's my because you can't get it
anywhere.
again. Okay, Dr. Goggles says, Zusio was your forum name inspired by the character from the 1982 film The Sword and the Sorcerer?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the. It's got one S in the film, so it's Zusia of Delos in the film. But I put the extra S in, and then that is actually my name. That's my middle name. So.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, you changed it by default, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Andy Marsh asks, was Mandroid created in the Zen room? I never want to think where Mandroid was created, if I'm perfectly honest.
But if he was going to be created anyway, it probably would be there.
It probably would be, yeah. Horror. The horror.
Horror of that game. Hey, Graham, here's a shout out for one of our sponsors' books, The Case of the Notorious Roboticist. Why is she notorious anyway, this Isadora? It's nothing to do with that Duran Duran song, is it?
It's even worse, Graham. She's programming bias into AI, and that does not spell good news for men in this cyberpunk dystopian noir thriller.
Okay, so what's going to stop her then?
Moroz. He's a nice guy. Bit of a bumbling fool, it's true, but he's got a heart of gold, gold. Always believe in your soul. Gold.
Okay, so not like Johnny Hates Jazz then?
Oh, no, thank God, no. When Isadora is charged with murder, which she refutes, as she thought it was her own android, she asks Moros to help her. But should he? And if he does, what will it cost him?
Intriguing. Grab The Case of the Notorious Roboticist by David Hearn from Amazon or Book Depository. Available everywhere as an audiobook too.
And it even features a roboticist named Elvin too. Interesting. Mark Fletcher asks, have we considered adding our own percentage ratings to the games you've reviewed? Would be an interesting comparison. I think we do that, don't we?
We do. We generally indicate whether we think it's too low or too high. I don't know that it would be. I don't know because I don't know if I could because we'd have to use their rating scheme as well to be able to be apples for apples comparison.
Yeah.
So I think I just tend to be more critical of what they rated, which is an indication of where I would rate it. I think, and I often say no, I'd give it more in the 80s or 90s and stuff like that. So.
And as I've sort of gone through, I mean, we say it's high or low, I would give it this or that sort of thing. I'm more of an opinion that it's what you should get whether we like it from the tone or not. I don't think it needs a number. I'm not a big review score like.
And we've said before now, give it 0 as well. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Andy Marsh says, have we come across any specific C128 games in any of the issues, like a 128K version of a particular game, the way the Specky 128K was catered for, or has there even been any mention of the C128? There was Kickstart. There was that Kickstart, wasn't there?
Kickstart. There was Last V8.
Was the Last V8 a C128?
Yeah, that was a special C128 version.
And there was that.
Didn't prove it.
No, and there was that crappy. We can't find any of these C128 actual versions. ROMs have been impossible to find.
Yeah, there's that airport game that we recently did.
Recently, what was it called? Not Tanium. It was
a really weird name. It was like it was almost really like a autobiography of some politician.
Yeah, that was the one.
But that was the one. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the game now. But there was a C128 version of that, which just put more animations in, I think.
Yeah, but no, we've not really come across many. I don't think there was a few. I mean, I've looked at a list, and there's a few, but nothing that we've sort of seen. I've
never seen anything that's really jumped out and really leveraged C128 for its extra power either. Not like, because the Specky 128 games that I saw, because I think it had a sound chip, didn't it? The Specky 128. So yeah, you tended to find that there was better music and better stuff in it. Because I remember seeing a couple of games. I think one was it Hydrafall or Hydra, something like that on it, which had a Rob Hubbard soundtrack, I think, on the Specky 128. And I remember seeing Amorite on the Specky 128, which was pretty spectacular on that. That had a lot more music and sounds and images and stuff like that. But they tended, because there was going from 48K Specky with no sound chip to a Specky 128K that had I think an AY chip or whatever that was in the Specky 128. I can't remember, but it had a sound chip in it and a bit more, so it had a bit more going about it. So, but still had the same problems.
There was something we that we reviewed last month for May. I'm trying to remember what it was. I can't remember what it was. What was it? It was really quiet, and we thought, we should have had music or something. I think it would have been Tanium, I think. Tanium on the one, Tanium on the I think on the Speccy 128 has like music and everything, and
Is it?
Yeah, I was looking at a YouTube version of it. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, so I mean,
there was a one for that.
No, I mean, I was just sort of looking around. I think it was Tanium.
I don't know. I don't tend to crank up the 128 emulator through Vice very often. I have to tell you, once in a million years.
Yeah. There's definitely. I definitely think it was. There's a version.
There's a C64 mode on the C128 where you can just turn it into a C64 instantly.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing we really come across, though, is there? Nothing major. And I think
if there was, we would look at them. If there was something that said this is dramatically different, go and have a look.
Well, it's hard getting the C128 versions, but also as well, I think there was that flight stealth mission. I think it mentions in the review that it runs slightly faster on the 128. It's got a faster processor, but there you go. That's about it. Buzzit asks, on average, how much playtime do you give a dog egg game for review purposes, and have you recently thrown a joystick controller in disgust?
I give them the same amount of time as I give, well, not the same amount. I give them as much time as I can afford to give them, in the sense that most of the dog egg games are shit and don't work properly anyway.
And it's obvious from the get-go that these are crap.
Yeah. So, and half the time they get the real dog egg ones, they're actually fighting you to play them because they're that bad that it's not that I don't want to play them. They're preventing me from getting anywhere in them half the time.
Yeah.
By such terrible design logic and stuff. So I give them as much time as an affordance as they give me in order to play them. If they're a crap game, it's not that I switch it off in disgust. Although I have to say, at the end of it, some of the ones that are in the lower doldrums, including the crappy bloody Lee Enfield that we've just done. Some of those, I switch them off in disgust after a short amount of time. And that's after trying to play them, because there's nothing to play in them. Yeah. There's no game in there. I'm just wandering around, not enjoying it, being tortured half the time with crap audio. And I can't do that. And so, have I thrown my controller? No, I haven't thrown a controller, not since I actually threw one. I had an old competition pro years ago and threw it against the wall when I got killed playing Catechus. And smashed it to pieces. That's the last time I threw a joystick controller in anger.
I don't think I've ever thrown a controller in disgust. I've probably slammed one down and gone, but I've never thrown a controller.
In a 360 game, I think it was Metal Gear, not Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear other one, Metal Gear Rising. That game nearly cost me a 360 controller.
It's hard, that one. I don't think, in regards to playtime, with the dog egg ones, it's sometimes, like you said, you sometimes fighting them. And what I generally will tend to do with those, because obviously we're playing it on Vice, so we're playing a ROM, I'll generally head over to CSDB and see if there's another one, because I'm actually doubly check with them that they are that shit, and that it's not a problem. It's not a problem with the crack being buggered up, because sometimes we have got games. We've played them, and the versions we've got, they just don't work properly, or something's missing. Infradroid was one that springs to mind. The first version of Infradroid we had was broken, and it took a while to find a working ROM of that. And then obviously we got that, and so it was all working all right. That Lee Enfield one, that wasn't the first one I got, was worse than what it was because it wouldn't move. Maybe that was better. Who knows? So I had to go find a proper working one. I still don't know if it is working properly, but I watched the video and it looks like it is. So it is. But yeah, so the dog egg ones actually can sometimes take a little bit longer because I'm actually making sure, is this really this crap? Yeah.
Sometimes you've got to double check it.
Yeah, and I'm like, because you don't want to go, oh, you played this, and like, no, we didn't. Yeah. It's really, really shit.
Yep, it is as bad as you think it is.
Yeah. David Writer asks, what do you think was Zapp's biggest gaffe, under or over? Okay, we kind of had this earlier sort of thing, but similar sort of thing. Pirates, he says, in 87. Number 2 64 game of all time, Lemon, it got a measly 68%, and the Kick's budget release got 40% in 93. That's his Commodore Force rather than Zap. I'm going to say mercenary again. I think it's way too high. Yeah, I get the high, tech, but it's way too high. I get Pirates. Yeah. I don't know. I think we've kind of answered this already, haven't we? I think it's
Train. We said the train. Probably another one.
I think the train's the other one. Nick Bungus says, "When is the next Ask the podcast?" It's now, right now.
We're recording it right now. This
right
second.
Now.
It's happening.
Dr. Goggles says, what are you going to do when you got to the end of Zap 64? Would you consider doing an Amiga version of the podcast?
We've talked about that.
We have. Don't know.
I don't know. As part of me sort of wants to explore the Amiga, part of me realizes that this I mean, if you thought there was a crap bunch of 64 games, there are a whole bunch of Amiga games. And it's actually finding the working versions of them is actually even more of a challenge to some extent with the Amiga ones. Because, some of those copyrights still exist. Some of those licenses are still owned by people that are out there making games, and you've got to tread carefully with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There are some Amiga games I'd like to explore.
I think,
I wonder whether there's a format for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if we were to do that, I don't think it would be as exhaustive of what we're doing here with the C64. Because I think the nature of the C64 games is a lot of them are quick, and we don't really have a set amount of time. Yeah. If it was to do Amiga games, we'd have to space our episodes out more. I like the fact that we're hitting every week. We can do sort of 7, 8, 9 games in a week and give them a bit of justice amongst doing full-time work, family, and everything else that goes along with that, getting the podcast mix released and everything that it entails. It's not a sort of couple of hour job. This is many hours. Yeah. Hitting the Amiga titles when you get to some of the bigger ones, to do them justice,
yeah. Can you imagine a single podcast episode alone? You could do it might be, you could look at sort of franchises of games. So you could do the Monkey Island games on the Amiga, for example. You could do a whole series on the Bitmap Brothers games. There's a lot. But there's more than just a few things, and they're big games.
And they are big games. The other thing with that is that what I don't want and what I didn't want with this podcast, and I think you would the same, is that it was the thing with this is it's a warts and all look. And what I wouldn't want to do is just the Amiga games that everyone's already looked at.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. That's pretty saturated. I mean,
so it's just you could look at the sensible games.
There.
You could look at Cannon Fodder. You could look at Megalomania. You could look at Secret Monkey Island.
Yeah.
You could look at Moonstone, Syndicate. But they've been done to death, and I don't really think I've got much more to add to the conversation. So
I agree.
But who the hell's talking about Lee Enfield or Tanium or Train Robbers that were just looked? Nobody really speaks about these kind of games, and that was the interesting thing about this. It was something we could do, and it was also something that we both grew up with. So there's all that tied in with and the music and the film. Are we going to talk about the same things again? I don't know. It's a hard. If we did something, it would have to be a completely different format, because I don't think this format would work in the way we are, because we don't have that nostalgic. I mean, you do a bit more than I do with the Amiga. I came to the Amiga a bit later, but I don't think either of us really have the nostalgic tie to those machines that we probably have with the C64.
The Amiga was very much a trading platform for me, and music creation.
Yeah, exactly.
And I did all the stuff with it, and the games were kind of neither here nor there.
Publishing machine. We wrote a magazine on it.
Exactly. I mean, I played less games on the Amiga by miles than I did on, I played the Amiga games like I played PC games. They were hit and miss, and now and again. Monkey Islands came along very rarely on the Amiga. There was loads of other games that came out. When I first got it, that was a slightly different story, because there was Shadow of the Beast and Shadow Beast 2 and
at the time kind of thing, it was like, look at the new shiny graphics, they're amazing.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
But it soon lost its wow factor.
It did, and these games are all on some of them 2 or 3 or 4 discs. In some instances, it got sort of silly with 12 discs, didn't it? Later down the line, I just don't think you'd end up with a fully working version of them. And also, a lot of the Amiga games that everyone remembers being really good also came out on the Mega Drive, which was an equally comparable, capable 16-bit machine that had all sorts of other stuff. And if you were going to play some of the Bitmap Brothers on games on Amiga, yes, they came out first on the Amiga, but they're just as playable on other formats. I don't know that there's much. I don't know what the angle would be, and it would take some thinking about that. Take some thinking about. I don't quite know how you would come at that and offer anything new, like you say. Everyone's spoken about Sensible Soccer like a billion times. What possible conversation could we have about Sensible Soccer? And we didn't really play Amiga games together that much.
No, we didn't.
I was very much focused on the demo scene on the Amiga, totally focused on demo scene and music with a little bit of games on the side. It was totally different experience to what I had on the C64.
Yeah, and we were just older. By the time you got your Amiga, we were like 17, 18. So
yeah, we were using it for our band. I mean, we used it for the band.
Exactly. So it was a different thing for us. So I think you would lose that. One of the things that that thing that makes this. And like I said, the thing with this is that a lot of the C64 games are just simple 10-minute, 15-minute blasters. You can have a quick go on, get the feel of, and you're done, and you're out. Tricky with the Amiga, tricky. I mean, we've got loads to do. We've still got loads to do. We're only halfway through the run of mags.
Oh, we've got tons
we're not
of
even
time,
halfway
yeah.
through. There's 91 zaps or variants of it.
Yeah.
And then there's the older games we've got to look at. We'd maybe look at the
newer ones,
the games that have been released since then. So all the newer stuff.
Yep. Yeah,
And, the recent resurgence in C64 games. So there's loads of space, yeah.
Yep.
And finally, what's this one? Nick Bungus says, I'm sure it's been mentioned that there's been loads of games omitted and they might go back and look at them. My question is one that's probably been asked before, but I'd like to know the history of when Adrian and Graham met and their early experiences together. I'm sure there was a band mentioned, and also I'd like to know how Gary fits in. Well, Gary fits in most places because he's...
he is kind of compact, isn't he?
He's compact and bijou. So Gary fits in most places. If you find him in places you don't want to find him, that's the terrifying part.
We were actually, I think I like to think of us, we were actually a unique collection of people at a certain time at school. This is how it all, a certain time, in certain pattern of things happened where we sort of met through each other in different means and different methods, but there were commonalities. We all had home computers, whether it was C64. Some of my friends had Sinclair Spectrum, some of yours had Amstrad, but we all had home computers back then. Mm-hmm. We were all kind of nerdy-ish a little bit with our home computers, a little bit. Some of us less nerdy than others, and some of us more nerdy than others, but we had that. We used to go around to each other's houses, which kids don't do anymore.
No, they don't.
But we used to go around to each other. We used to go and call for each other. But we were never into the things that would generally be considered the things that would get people. So we were never in sports teams together or anything like that. In fact, I was not sporty at all. You were well into football, as I remember.
Yeah, I was in sports.
You were quite sporty. Gary, a little bit, I think. I think he likes his football. I don't know if he played it so much, but he did. He was into it at a certain point. I know I wasn't sporty at all. I was quite a fat teenager as it goes. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't into that. And I had a couple of mates that were kind of, if you looked at those, if you put sort of all of us in line, because there was about 5 of us that generally hung around together at the same time. There was me, you, and there was like the core really, which was kind of me, you, and Gary.
Yeah.
No, you guys were a bit old, only a year older than me, but you guys were kind of, you'd been friends for quite some time because you had been at the middle school together, right?
No, me and Gary met the very first day at Whitgift. It was
I thought for some reason I thought he was at middle school.
No, he was Willers. I was Greatcoats.
Right.
So we met. He was sat on the Gary. We went into tutorial on the very first day. So we're 12 years old. I sat back left, as far away from the teacher's table as I could, at the front, and Gary sat at the table in front of me. And I remember him turning around to me, and he goes, I think he asked me if I had a computer. I said, yeah. And he went, what have you got? I went, Commodore 64. He says, oh, so have I. And he said, do you want to come around and play some games? And that was that.
That's how it happens.
That was how it happened at 12 years old. And so that was that. Because
I was at middle school or junior school with Richard and Simon, who were a couple of friends. We don't often mention them in the podcast, every now and again. But I was at school with them, and I was actually in they were in all my classes. Actually, no, more Richard than Simon. But we were sort of, because the school was kind of split into houses. There was 4 houses. You were in, I think, Heneage, which is the name of one of the houses. I think a couple of friends of mine were in Heneage. I was in Franklin, which was another one. I think Gary was in one of them, Heneage, I think. And that's how the school kind of split. And you were in different kind of tutor groups, different classes to some extent. And there was some crossover, and it was those crossover moments when you sort of, you would ask questions like, have you got a computer and stuff like that. I got to know Gary very early on, and not early on before AD early on. So I initially, I think I met you beforehand because we'd met at that Dungeons and Dragons thing but I'm not sure what time period that was.
Well, I was in the lower 6th, so I think, and you were in the 5th year, weren't you? So 16, 17. So that would have been about 89, 89-ish, I think.
89, yeah. And I'd met Gary prior to that because I'd met Gary through a mutual friend whose name was Mark, who was NMI in S-Express. The NMI in S-Express was a guy called Mark.
Yeah.
And he was busy trading C64 stuff as well as Gary, because they were in a group together called the Gremlins at the time.
Oh, yeah,
with a chap
I remember
called
that.
Paddy. And they'd released a couple of really crap demos, one called Barbarian, which you can download off CSDB. It's out there. And so he was Spud of the Gremlins. That was Gary. Podcast friend Gary was Spud of the Gremlins, and Mark was NMI. And they were fumbling around trying to make demos, but hopeless. And I'd bumped into Mark quite I can't remember really how we'd come to know Mark. I'm not sure, but I remember Mark saying, "Oh, you really got with my mate Gary," and I can't remember how it came to be anyway. And I was friends with a guy called John, now Joe, but Joe, and Joe was an exceptionally clever programmer. Just a clever guy. He was really clever, and we were actually trying to figure stuff out in the Commodore 64 at the same time. He was genuinely still is a really clever person, really clever, amazingly talented coder. Yeah, they were. Anyway, cut a long story short, we ended up doing a demo for S Express because they asked us if we could. They showed us this bunch of raster bars and stuff on a Commodore 64. And said, "Is there any way you can do that?" So we was like, "Yeah, we can do that." So we did. We just, we figured it out. We made them this crappy demo, which you can download off a CSDP. It's called Psychedelic. It's crap, really crap. But we made that, and then that's how the friendship with Gary and S Express, and that's how that kind of launched. As a side note to that, obviously you were friends with Gary, and we'd started to watch more movies and stuff together, and start just do other stuff other than Commodore 64 stuff together. I used to go around to Gary's house quite a bit just to watch movies. His dad used to get all these early sort of pirated videos back then. They were a big thing. To watch some of them, and then I think at some point you were around at his house, and then just things that people meet each other. The friends become friends of friends. You'd come round to my house one time, I think, when we were doing a demo and did some scrolly writing, and that's how it was. We were just into similar things. I was into a lot of similar music. You were into really cool music. Gary was into cool music. I wasn't. So it was quite interesting to sort of get into the kind of music you brought with you. Being a year older, it didn't seem like much, but you had a lot of good music in your collections at that time, and you were just really interesting people. But you weren't judgmental. You were really good people to know. I still are. And I mean, I'm saying that because we're on a podcast, but that's why we've been friends for such a long time. Why we've known Gary for such a long time. We just those kind of people don't come into your life very often. And when they do, you're friends for life. You know that when you first meet people like that. And so that's how Gary, certainly how I met, and then as it turned out, I lived in literally the middle of all the people. So I lived in the middle, and where I lived was literally, if you drew an arrow from my house to Adrian's house, to Gary's house, to Rick's house, to the other Richard's house, and to Simon's house, I was pretty much bang in the middle. So it kind of just became a place where guys would come to my house. One, because I had my own bedroom that had a video recorder in it and a C64, and I had parents that, as long as I was quiet, relatively didn't give a shit what we did, which is understandable, really. I mean, we weren't trouble, but it was just a good central point to meet, because it was handy. There was a nearby shop. We could just go and buy crappy junk food all the time. It became a central point. And my parents weren't in a lot, which meant that we just had, just chill out. And it was just nice. And we went around to each other's houses like you don't do anymore. Kids don't do that now, because I don't know why, but they don't.
No.
Going around to someone's house to watch telly with them seems unheard of.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. And like what Nick's asking is, the band. I mean, I think me and you had a very much a very similar creative drive that I think was unique to me and you.
Right.
I think Gary was. Yeah. Gary did a bit, but I think ours flew in different directions. So it was. Yeah. I got a guitar. Wanted to learn to play. I had a guitar for a while, but I was learning to play it. You got a bass. Was like, let's just do this. Let's make a magazine. And I think it was always.
We just wanted to create stuff.
Just do stuff. And I think it was the same with the stupid films we made. Because I remember you did the very first, we had a trilogy, the Haunting trilogy of films. And your first one, which I had nothing to do with, was like a short 4 or 5 minute thing that you made on it. Yeah, and then and I'm not sort of saying I was anything about it, but when obviously I got involved in the second one, which was a year later, it was 45 minutes long, and it was a much more detailed. It was still pretty crap, but it was much more detailed. Then the following year, we did this nearly hour long one, which was much better and more plotted and everything. So there was a bouncing off of just whereas some people are just mucking about. I think me and you always took it to be like, well, let's try and do as best we can.
I agree. I think definitely we had a drive to do that. That's what. We weren't just a band that played gigs in our garage. We did gigs in places. We went to places. Yeah. We went and found a place where we could rehearse, because there was a youth centre that we went to. We used to go there on a Sunday morning,
10 o'clock on Sunday morning,
walking all of our equipment there, sometimes carrying amps and guitars and all sorts. And it was no short distance.
It was about 3 miles, wasn't it?
It's a 3 mile walk both ways. And we walked there. sometimes we get there early and queue up outside in the morning, get in there so we could practice in there because they had a PA essentially and a stage you could sort of use. And an amazing guy called Roy, bless him, he's now died, but an amazing guy who used to get up and give up his weekends so he could help the young bands of Grimsby go and have a place to practice. Amazing guy, amazing thing. So we used to do that, but we had that drive to do it. We wanted to be on stage, I think,
I think so, yeah. And we wanted to do our own stuff. We did a couple of covers, but majority of our stuff we wrote, and it was just that we just like to. Yeah. I think we just like to create stuff, and so since then, made games, done stuff. It's just
the band, the music for reference, because there's none of it exists now. You can't. There's no place where it exists. It's probably on some rogue tape somewhere. You might have some, but I certainly don't have any.
Maybe.
But to give you an idea, it's a very difficult sound to create. Sound to describe. It was heavily influenced by so many different genres of music. The kind of band that we were, it was kind of pop, punk, neo, rush, goth, industrial. Because those are the influences in it. I mean, we had a drum machine that gave it an industrial kind of quality, but we played punk kind of rhythms and style guitar, pop punk, but we had a goth kind of vibe about melancholy about some of the stuff. I don't know, it's really hard to pin down anyway. People kind of dug it for a while. So started out as a metal band.
We did, a bad metal band. Very bad. Very bad.
Unworthy of Angels.
Oh, dreadful
Red
name.
Rock.
Dreadful name. Red Rock's better than Unworthy of Angels.
We were only Unworthy of Angels because at that point we had a drummer that couldn't drum, a guitarist that couldn't play, and a singer that couldn't sing. Other than that, we were, for a while, we were the most talented musicians in that band. Absolutely.
You were record executives that were snapping Kit Kats at the sight of us.
Yeah, they were, yeah. I mean, I'd never picked up a bass guitar in my life until that moment. You played guitar for a bit, but we weren't, we were just finding our way. We found our way, and we found our way. This is what I've always said, is that, one of the glues of our friendship and what's made this podcast work and everything else is because we just got on with it. No, we didn't have a drummer, so we didn't stop. We just that Amiga makes drum sounds. I've got a seat, I borrowed a sampler off somebody, sampled Gamma Ray's drums from one of their songs off their Say No More album, and we just used them. So we know our drummer is essentially the drummer from Gamma Ray in our band. Until we got a drummer, until we got an actual drummer. We had an amazing drummer for a one gig, and then a really funny guy called Wriggle took over the drums. He's a legend in his own lifetime anyway. We've mentioned him before. That's the guy that killed his mum and dad's budgie with Paxo. That guy, he was the drummer in our band for a while. Kid Conan.
Am I gone? Am I back?
No, you're still here.
All right, cool. I froze.
Kid Conan.
Kid Conan.
Anyway, so those we've had so many early experiences. But, there's always been media output involved in all of them. Magazines, videos, music, podcasts.
And now podcast, yeah. And we'll just keep going. We'll just keep doing something or other.
Yep.
I think that's it. That's all the questions. We had a lot there. Hopefully you've found that enjoyable. If you wish to ask your own, if you're not one of our listeners, if you one of our patrons, and you wish to get in on that action, and you want to ask us some questions, then you can do that by heading over to our Patreon and signing up for the £4.50 tier, patreon.com/Zapped to the Past. Help us out. If you're feeling very festive and you just want to get a bit of that, we've signed up to change the Patreon, by the way, that it's the new version of payment. So you only get charged from the day you sign up. So even if you sign up like on the 27th of December, you're not going to get charged again until the 27th of January. It's on a monthly rolling contract thing like that. They introduced it. So whereas before you pay on the 27th and then get charged again on the 1st, doesn't happen anymore. So we've switched that over. Anymore. So hopefully that works. So, I presume it does. That's the Patreon side of things. But if you want to do that, that'd be great. And you get your episodes early and without ads and things like that. So if you want to do all that, that's great. This has been fun. I've enjoyed it. It's got a lot of questions.
Yep.
I like this kind of thing.
Good.
Hopefully you've enjoyed it. We'll be back soon with episode 92. As we go into the new year, we carry on with June 1988. Hopefully the games get better than what you heard in the last episode. And I think that's it. It's late. We've been recording a long time tonight, so I think we should finish there.
It's like the old days.
It really, it does feel like the old days, yeah. So, as ever, I have been Adrian Mills.
And I have been Graham Ruddings.
And you have been listening to this very special Ask the Podcast episode of Zapped to the Past. We will see you probably in the new year. So, have a good one. Goodbye.
Good biddly bong. Thank you for listening to the Zapped to the Past podcast. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of Commodore 64 games, as well as the music, films and TV from around the 1980s, driven, of course, by the issue of Zap 64 magazine published at that time. We will return with a whole new batch of games and stuff to talk about next week. Until then, if you want to listen to or download previous episodes of Zapped to the Past, and why wouldn't you, they can all be found on our website at zappedtothepast.com, as well as being available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, Player FM, and, well, pretty much anywhere where we can upload them. By the way, we do always love to hear from our amazing listeners, so if you'd like to contact us about anything in the podcast or beyond, you can do so by emailing us at zappedtothepast@gmail.com. We're also active on Twitter under @ZapTothe, as well as Facebook, Instagram, and most social media platforms. Just search for Zapped to the Past and you'll find us. Oh, and if you like the podcast and what we're doing, please do like, share, review, rate us. It really helps. Something, apparently. The Zapped to the Past podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings, and recorded at Flaky Bits 2.0 Studio. All opinions expressed are those of the writers, and while we indeed love Zap 64 magazine, the Zapped to the Past podcast is not affiliated with it in any way. Stay safe, see you next time, and remember, we play these games so you don't have to.